Today, I'm going to give you some beef that I've had for years now, and maybe nobody else has. I reckon there are a few people who share this with me, but the issue is this broad language of vibe speak. People talking about the vibe being good, the vibe being bad, not getting with the vibe, a cafe having a cozy vibe. His vibe upset me. We weren't vibing. And I just can't really get to the bottom of what people are saying in these situations. It seems to be some kind of use of metaphorical language that actually kind of diverts attention from what's really going on in these situations. And I'll lay out for you why exactly it bugs me. People describe a place as having a good vibe, a person as having a bad vibe, and they don't explain what was off, what was going so well most of the time. It feels explanatory without explaining anything. And when someone says that the vibe was off, something weird was going on, like maybe they're picking up on irregularities at the micro expressions of somebody's face or the weird power dynamics asserted in the room, but they're not picking up on a vibration. They're not intuiting a thing oscillating between two states. Now, if you say that a room of people has a great vibe, well, now you're talking about group dynamics. And maybe people don't talk louder than you like, and maybe they have a similarly refined sense of what good conversation is. But I don't see the vibes you speak of. And when we say that the cafe has cozy vibes, well, we're saying that the cafe is cozy, and I get coziness. I like coziness. But I don't have to think about vibrations in order to understand coziness. And so the problem, I think, is that vibes externalizes something that tends to be an internal phenomena. There's not something out there in the world that's vibrating. It's an impression, it's a prejudice, it's my perception of the issue that I will rate as good or bad, but without taking the honest step of owning it as my own perception. So here's what I think is happening. I think that you're experiencing your own preferences and prejudices and projecting them onto the other person or situation. You're calling something a property of that thing that isn't. Okay, and then here it would be really tempting to conclude, nah, vibes aren't real, there's no purpose. But let's explore it a little further and let's see where we get to. Next step. What is a vibration? And I think the best places to go for an answer about what a vibration actually is are music and physics. Vibrations have been defined in musical terms and in physical terms. First, for physics, they define a vibration as an oscillation of a thing between two states. So effectively, there's a thing, and then something kind of like pushes it in one direction, and then a restoring force comes around and pushes it in the other direction. But it overshoots the center and the restoring force pushes it back again. So it ends up going back and forth across the central point. And a vibration has certain measurable qualities in physics, like its amplitude, which is how far those swings are going to be. Its frequency, which is about how frequently it's going to hit those maximal points or come back to center. Its phase, which is where in the system is the thing, at which part of the cycle is the thing at that moment. Now, music. So in music, a string, for example, it'll vibrate according to the physical laws we've described, like it goes in one direction and it keeps swinging back and forth along the central point. And as it vibrates like that, it's going to push air into these pressure pockets. It can push air into these pressure pockets, which make this kind of wave pattern. That wave pattern hits the eardrum, and the eardrum vibrates to give us a vibration again. So if we, for example, talk about a vibey party, there are vibrations involved. There's banging music. There's people maybe tapping their feet and grooving a little bit side to side. You can see how that movement takes you forwards and back to center, back around. It's got a frequency, it's got an oscillation. I could even give that like maybe a heartbeat and your rate of breathing have a kind of vibratory aspect to them. But the party as a whole, not really a vibe, not really a vibration. Like time is continuing to go on. There's entropy in the system. Things never come back to the state that they were in before. You'll never find a moment where things return back to some center. It just keeps going. So, does the party have a vibe? We haven't discovered what it is. Our language so far can only take us towards a definition as given in physics and music. I've got some other ideas though. I know some people that we can call in and get some more clarity on this situation. And what I'm trying to do here is show that there is something going on. There's something going on. He has a bad vibe. She's got a great vibe. The party is vibey, right? But I just don't think those terms appropriately express what's going on. So let's just dig a little bit deeper, find out what we're trying to say with those terms, and see if we can refine it a little bit. See if we can improve upon this way of speaking. Okay, so next up, the person I've got for you today behind door one is Mr. Wittgenstein himself, the great linguistic philosopher. This guy is going to clear this stuff up for us. Wittgenstein was predominantly interested in philosophical discourse, and he found that like a lot of people were using language in ways that led to conflict. In fact, he found this is a big part of how we talk about philosophy and how we talk about what's real. Metaphysics, ontology, ethics. This guy found that so many terms that we're using and debating about don't have a specific definition that everybody holds in common. And Wittgenstein's big mission was to help us find out how we can discuss truth, how we can find truth and talk about truth. And his main point is this: there's no sense philosophizing about something that cannot be represented as a possible state of affairs that could be either true or false. And I don't know about you, but this cafe has cozy vibes. I don't feel can really be determined is true or false. You might say it's cozy and I might have a difference of opinion. And then who's to say what the truth value of that statement is? Who's true? Who's false? Is the cafe cozy? Is it not? Is it vibey? So Wittgenstein would say about the cafe's cozy vibe that we're not speaking falsely. We're not telling the truth either. We're just speaking nonsense. At least in philosophical terms. If we're trying to talk about like what's real, then we're kind of speaking nonsense. If we extend that way of thinking, then we find out that pretty much all of your subjective experiences can't be put into factual languages like this. So they're just not open for interpretation in a philosophical discussion. And so the subjective experience of that party had a good vibe. There could be something there. There could be something you experienced, but it can't be stated in those terms. So that's it. Let's get rid of vibe language. Let's throw this in the bin. Let's speak truth. Let's speak facts. But here's the thing. Wittgenstein changed his mind. He changed his mind in an admirable, dramatic, and public way. He rewrote the rules that he wrote for himself. He broke them. He smashed them into a myriad of language games, and all of them operate by their own rules. So Wittgenstein realized that rather than looking at a word as having a unified meaning that all statements are calling on, actually, Words can be used in separate language games, and those language games don't have to have any reference to each other. In the case of vibrations, we've got the physics and music language games. You can treat those as two language games, or they're actually quite similar. The musical one makes use of the physics model, so they're still quite contained in the second language game. And then the rules that we've got there about things having an amplitude, there's an oscillation, there's a central point that the state always returns to. Objects discussed in that language game must have those attributes. Otherwise, it becomes nonsensical in this sphere. Conversely, we've got vibrations describing group dynamics or aesthetics, and maybe those are multiple language games, or maybe those are really quite a similar language game, which we're describing by vibes. So this word vibration, it's got this meaning over here with physics and music, but we don't have to mean that thing at all when we talk about vibes in the social sphere. We can use social vibes with its own definition and ideas in a way that's totally disconnected and doesn't refer at all to musical and physical vibes. But really? Why are we using this term then? Why vibration? Why not pick some other physical property? I liked the luminosity at the party yesterday. Her temperature was honest. His pressure was low yesterday. Luminosity, temperature, pressure are all physical properties of things that bear equally no relation to the kinds of situations that we describe in the vibration as that word vibration does. Well, equally no relation according to Wittgenstein. So we failed to use this vibrational language as some kind of factual claim about how things work. But we found that, sure, it's fine to use language in a language game. We've got this whole way of speaking that's just popped up around this word vibe. Probably it's got nothing to do with the physics and music stuff happening over here. We can just use it. We don't have to think too much about it. But I am still curious. If vibes aren't factual claims, how do they help us make meaning at all? How do they make sense? What kind of thing are we saying when we're saying that somebody's got a vibe? If it's not a fact, if it's not true or false, what is it? Well, I've got some input into this idea from my mates Lakoff and Johnson, who wrote the book, The Metaphors We Live By. These guys show that our language is replete with metaphors. We're using metaphor all the time in really deep ways without noticing. In fact, there are plenty of things we just can't express. Our language doesn't contain an expression for unless it's metaphorically linking it to something that's more tangible. Something that we can really feel and have contact with. For one of their big examples that they go through thoroughly in their book, we often think in terms of the metaphor, time is money. Time is money. You've heard the phrase time is money, and you thinking in terms of that metaphor doesn't mean that you're like a pedantic busy bee and you go around reminding people, better be productive, time is money. No, you don't actually have to say those words, but you will, in fact, talk about spending time with a friend. And you might save time by calling an Uber instead of walking. You budget your time, things cost you time, you invest time, and sometimes you run out of time. This abstract concept is governed in our language and thought by the metaphor of money, which is abstract in its own way, but at least it has some associated behaviors that we can then port over to the time conversation. We'll bring this back to vibes in a second. But notice how far-reaching this metaphor is. Time is money is so powerful that we can take our grammar of money and shape time into it. I could tell you, well, I'm cash poor, but I'm time rich right now. And You may have never heard it that way, but you won't miss a beat in catching my meaning because the metaphorical structure is already there. It's in the very way that you think about and perceive time. The main question's going to be whether vibe works in the same way. Is it structuring our perception rather than stating some fact? What's so special about time as money anyway? Is it that they're both limited resources? And yeah, I reckon that's probably part of it. Of course, if you dive deep into it philosophically, you'll find that time is not a limited resource. It's a physical property of the universe. There's no limitation because this moment is followed by the next moment. And then there's another moment after that and another one. So time seen in that lens is just this continual flow, which is also a metaphor, just a different one. However, the reason we keep going back to this resource-based money metaphor is because that's what time feels like in a productivity-focused society. When you've got to perform, when you've got to get things done, when you've got KPIs to meet, money to make, and honestly, this hurting world to save, time as money is a pretty apt metaphor for describing the relationship that we need with time in order to get stuff done. Now, I'm not saying that's a superior way of being, and we could really divert into some conversation about how you change the metaphor in order to change culture, but we should really be getting back to vibes now. Okay, I think we can now ask a couple of key questions. Does the vibrational metaphor actually fit the social situations that we use it to describe? Do vibrations have a structural similarity to the moods, environments, social interactions, and aesthetics that we apply it to? Let's dig into these situations. What unifies all these cases when we say there's a vibe? Remember, I judged at the beginning that the vibe we're talking about is this internal quality that we then project and impose onto the outside world. Well, I was a bit giving myself away there. That is a thought that I had at one point, and I've since progressed on from there. What the vibe is really, in my opinion, isn't an internal quality projected on something, nor is it a quality of the thing that we're perceiving. It's an intersubjective quality. It's something that the thing and I participate in. The vibe speaker and the vibe that's perceived somehow have to interact in order for that statement to be meaningful. It was tempting for me to point to either the subject or the object as the thing holding the vibe, because it's kind of just harder to think about intersubjective space. No one controls the pattern. Everyone contributes to it, but it's not the product or the property of any individual. Let's look for this metaphor out in the wild and see what it reveals. All right, picture this. It's a bright, sunny day. You're going on a hike. You've got your hiking buddies. You're a group of 4. One of them is your friend from before, the one who invited you, but the other 2 are new to you. And to be honest, you feel pretty out of sync from them. You'll get in the car to drive to the trailhead. You chat in the car. You make a really obscure film reference, but somebody picks it up. And then suddenly you feel like you're resonating a bit. Yeah, but the other person, well, they make a joke and they've got this kind of dark humor that doesn't really sit well with you. And for a couple of moments, you're caught in this feeling of dissonance. Now, the hike is fantastic. That sun is shining. The breeze is just blowing across the hilltops. The hiking snacks were perfect. Though there was just that one moment where you weren't sure, is everybody going to share or is each person just going to eat like what they themselves brought? And you do end up sharing. It was quite nice. And you suddenly feel how that act of community harmony started this feedback loop that led to deeper sharing and deeper intimacy. And you end up opening up. You open up about stuff that you'd only really shared with your diary, your cat, and no one else. And as you head out of the hills, the shadows getting long, the car coming into view at the trailhead, you have this sense that y'all are on the same wavelength. You get each other in a way that you didn't at first. And nothing dramatic happened. You just all found this rhythm together. And now, all day, no one said, oh, this vibe is good now. But that's the feeling you're left with at the end of the day. Your hiker posse became more trusting, more coordinating, and able to reach deeper into vulnerability as the day went on. Now, let's look at all this rich language we've just uncovered. Without bringing up vibration, we've mentioned the terms in sync, resonance, dissonance, harmony, feedback loop, wavelength, and rhythm. So these are all words that you'll recognize from music and from sound engineering. They've been used in high density here to tell a particular kind of story, the story of the vibe. And we begin to see that the same way that time is money ports across spending and saving and budgets and costs, social life is vibration, effortlessly pulls across all the physical dynamics of vibration, my favorite of which is harmony. Harmony describes how oscillating systems interact. We're used to hearing about harmonies in music. We talk about consonant harmonies, which are these pairings of vibrations that have a particularly nice aesthetic quality to the ear. And then conversely, we've got dissonant harmonies, which don't tend to sound so nice. Any harmony is composed of multiple vibrations, and it can be described in terms of a single composite vibration, a sum of all the vibratory elements. And so here is the thing. Here's the question. Now, getting into the vibrational metaphor kind of on its own terms, giving it a good shot. What if we say, in this scenario that we've constructed, that you have a vibe? Each of your 3 hiking companions has a vibe. The sun shining down imparts a vibe. The breeze gives a vibe. There's a vibe of the humor and the topic of conversation. The food gives you a vibe. And the deep urges of your heart to share intimately have a vibe. And I'm not speaking metaphysically here. I'm speaking metaphorically. When we look at all these elements as having their own oscillatory rhythm, we can start to look at harmonic relationships between them. A harmonic relationship would give us a quality of consonance. These two things work well together, create something pleasant. It would also give us the power to assess dissonance. These elements, they do not work well together. They should be kept apart. When I like the vibe of this hiking foray, I'm experiencing consonant harmonics. My vibe matches pleasantly with that of the environment and my companions. My personal vibration is not disrupted, interrupted, distorted, or overcome by the vibrations that mix with mine from my group and me interacting. Now, how deep can we go with this metaphor? Does the structure of a vibration line up perfectly with the structure of our day hike? I'll be honest, I usually get stumped when I try to define exactly what the thing is that's oscillating between two states. I don't know if the metaphor is genuinely useful at that level of analysis. One level up from that, though, I get a lot of richness out of it. And to be clear, I think the metaphor does a lot of good work without identifying what the oscillating component is. We're just taking this form of the vibration, the dynamics of the vibration, and we're giving those a home in our social dynamics. Okay, so up till now, you've come with me on a journey that wasn't exactly what it looked like from the beginning. This was a journey from being an utter vibe skeptic to vibe tolerant to a full vibratory acolyte. And this is genuinely my story. I was honestly a vibe hater. And there's a lot of transformation and a long journey between there and here. I puzzled over the vibratory metaphor for years before it finally disclosed itself to me as a very wise way of looking at social interactions. And then it expanded from there to plenty of other situations. This shift in my way of thinking was largely due to a lot of what we've discussed here today. I had to understand why we use language. I had to open myself up to these kind of language games rather than specific definitions. And then I had to understand that there is and a metaphorical way of using language that is valid and useful and helpful. And now we've stopped short of saying that the vibe is real or the vibe is not real, but that is a question that I hope to tackle in the future. Now, this large shift in my thinking happened due to opening myself up to this fact that we use language in different kinds of games. We don't have to adhere to one definition. We can start talking and then we get what the other person is saying and we could just kind of build language up from there. And then so I started to think that vibes and energy and some of these other terms are being used in that kind of way. So language games, well, I decided to play the game, and I really did it with the spirit of play. I tried to understand people on their own terms when they were using vibratory language. I started using the term myself. I think it was one of those things that went from a kind of sarcastic approach to then actually becoming an embodied part of my personality. Well, as I started to use the language and listen to the language, something happened that I really didn't expect. What happened is that vibes became real. Suddenly I was seeing dynamics, I was seeing things that I just didn't perceive before. I was noticing social dynamics, I was noticing aesthetics. This is especially powerful in altered states, or when the vibe suddenly shifted, like somebody comes into the room or somebody leaves the room, or I go from working out to dinner. And it may sound a little bit nuts, but there was just this layer of reality I was not noticing before. And it's wild because these things I'm talking about, the vibe, the people coming into the room and leaving the room, all of that's in my own experience. That's here or somewhere. But that's me, that's my content. Yet there was a part of my own experience that I wasn't even noticing. And the vibrational metaphor, it helped me unlock it. It helped me realize that these things are happening. So I wasn't using language appropriately to interpret them because I was really concerned about saying things that are factual. And embracing vibe language gave me this new sense of tuning into the vibe, the external vibe and my internal one. It led to this journey of interpreting these states, the outside and the inside one. And I started to develop strategies to enhance the consonant harmonies, those nice, sweet sounding ones, and try to keep myself out of all those dissonances that I would stumble into without really knowing the factors of. This metaphor has some real power. And I'm pretty grateful to whomever it was who started using this first in a metaphorical way. And I always imagine them really high on weed and listening to vinyls. And I see the fact that this word has been in common use for decades now as pointing to we're intuiting this layer of reality. There's something going on here. There's something going on here to pay attention to and communicate about. I've gone to some length to try to break open a couple of these ideas in this video. I'll have more of those coming. But it's already part of a lot of people's embodied intuition. And the project that I'm setting for myself is to explore the how and why of that being useful. And if we bring this process into conscious cognition, can we make some improvements and advances upon this intuition of the vibratory nature of things? Let's see where we get to. So here's where we are for today. Vibes aren't facts, but they're not nonsense either. They're a way of tracking intersubjective patterns that matter. And we won't go into it now, but the vibe is independent of personal preference. Sure, we can like some vibes more than other ones, but there are generally good vibes and bad vibes. If this metaphor is taken seriously, it opens up an entirely new way of paying attention, one which I'll explore next.